Hi there, my name is Mr. Pete. I am a fourth grade teacher. I'm currently reading The Lemonade Crime, and we are in chapter 16, our final chapter, where our main question hasn't been resolved yet. Did Scott Spencer take the money? My classes have always gone back and forth on this, and here we are in the last chapter. Will we find out? We know we kind of got the resolution with Jessie in the last chapter, and that her and Megan made up, and we see that Megan continues to be that level 6 character in this book. And we did meet Grandma, and we know that Jessie now is understanding she lied, it was wrong, but she did it from a good place. She was trying to protect her brother. And here we go with Evan now, who was extremely brutal, beating Scott in a game of one-on-one by not only beating him in points, but also sort of beating on him. Lots of blood and elbows and running over. And, these once former friends couldn't be further from that at this point. So make your predictions in your head right now where this is going to go. Chapter 16, Amends. We do have a few different settings in this book, so you'll definitely want to keep track of that. Remember, it's Saturday morning, and Evan has put himself in this not eating mode for probably his own reasons, but it's definitely probably connected to the fact that it's Yom Kippur, which is that Jewish holiday that we learned about in an earlier chapter. How will this get resolved? Will we find out the money situation? Where do we go from here? Evan chapter mostly. Amends, highlight, vocabulary. Noun, legal compensation of money or other valuable assets as a repair for loss, damage, or injury of any kind. And let me just be straight with you. Amends are when you make up for something that you've done wrong. So right now you should be saying, okay, is this Evan who's going to make amends? Is this the person who took the money? Is this Scott Spencer making amends? Is this everybody making amends? Here we go. Let's resolve this. Resolution on our plot mountain. A little bit of falling action still. In his whole life, Evan had never gone this long without eating. And the weirdest thing of all was that he wasn't even hungry anymore. Sometime around 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, his hunger had just disappeared, like turning off a light switch. Simile. He felt empty and light and a little buzzy in his head, but not hungry. He hadn't even planned it. Yesterday, he'd come home and eaten his dinner as usual. And then the sun went down, and he thought about Adam and Paul, and he wondered if they had started fasting, and if they would make it all the way till tomorrow night. And then he wanted to see if he could do it. Go 24 hours without food. Just wanted to see what it was like, and if he had the strength to do it. And that got him thinking about the Day of Atonement. The less he ate, the more he thought, until here he was, sitting on his branch of the climbing tree, way up high, with the leaves whispering to him, and the birds pecking for their last snack of the day, and late afternoon shadows beginning to stretch across the yard. There's more visualization there, beautiful. But we have a setting with a climbing tree. Remember, that's where Evan and Jessie would go when their dad left. And it's also personification because the leaves of that whispering tree, or the climbing tree whispering to him, they weren't really, but he was going up there to think. He began to think about his sins, highlight vocabulary word. A sin is when you do something wrong. And that was a hard thing to think about. Did he really have any sins? He didn't know. But there was one thing he did know. Right now, he felt lousy. And Evan knew that when he felt really bad, that usually meant he'd done something he regretted. Highlight vocab word. To regret something is to feel bad about it and wish you didn't do it. Evan regretted that whole basketball game. He wished he hadn't played like that. He wished Megan hadn't seen him play like that, or Jessie, or anyone. He wished he hadn't been such a jerk. The game kept playing over and over in his head, every perfect shot looping through his brain, and it made him feel sick. He was never going to know what had happened to that missing money. But crushing Scott on the basketball court wasn't going to change that. Evan climbed down from the tree and went into the house. Change in setting. Jesse was in the kitchen with a mixing bowl and a bunch of ingredients spread out on the countertop. Flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. "What you making?" he asked as he walked through. "Your favorite, chocolate chip." So she's making the cookies like her grandma suggested. "Thanks," said Evan, grabbing his baseball hat from the front hall closet and heading for the door. "Where are you going?" asked Jesse. "Scott's." "No," said Jesse, "don't do that."
No, no, no.
No! No, 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 no! No!
What? No!
No!
No. No, no.
No, 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 no.
"Quit worrying. Tell Mom where I went, okay?" Jesse followed him to the door. "And don't eat all the cookies before I get back," he shouted over his shoulder. He didn't really have a plan. In the back of his mind, he figured a handshake and at least one "I'm sorry" were somewhere in his future. Beyond that, he didn't know what would happen. So we've known this about Evan from the start. He always leads with emotion, and then when he gets through it, he realizes his mistake and then does something about it. So he goes from that level 0 back to that level 5 or level 6. And I think we have to remember my fourth grade class. Like, as kids, we make mistakes just like that all the time. You haven't lived life a whole long time, so you learn from your mistakes. And Evan does learn from his mistakes. He's made a lot of them in all these books, but he does make up for them. Now, hopefully, as he gets older, he'll stop leading with the emotion and get to that place of thoughtfulness first before he makes those mistakes, because that's key, is to learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are always going to happen. I'm not saying you embrace mistakes, but you have to know that it's going to come, and when you make a mistake, you learn from it and you better yourself. And any teacher who doesn't accept that needs to be a better teacher, because all of my students will make mistakes. I make mistakes every single day, and I make them better, okay? Never feel like you can't get out of a mistake, but try to get ahead of them as you learn, okay? Scott's house was a short bike ride away from Evans, but his neighborhood was a world apart. Wow, what a great description. Let's see what he means by that, because that's hyperbole. They're close, but far. How are they? They're close in distance, but how are they far apart? The houses were huge and had fancy bushes planted in little groups and 2-car attached garages and lawns that looked like they were edged with a razor blade. Hyperbole. As Evan walked up the brick path to the front door, he noticed that the 2 large maple trees in the yard were beginning to turn. They would drop a lot of leaves next month, but Evan knew that Scott never had to rake because his family had a service that took care of the yard. When the front door opened, Evan wasn't surprised to see Scott standing there. Evan could hardly ever remember Scott's parents answering the door. He looked better than he had yesterday, that was for sure. Cleaned up, no blood, and he was wearing jeans, which covered up his knees. But the look on his face was the same, a look of hatred. Pure hatred beamed right at Evan.
I hate you from my
said Evan. What? Said Scott. What do you want? Evan hadn't rehearsed what he was going to say, and now that he had Scott's angry face right in front of him, it was hard to come up with anything on the spot. He stood there for a minute, his mind a blank. What had he come here for? And then he said the only thing he could think of. I wanted to see your new 2020. That changed everything. Scott stopped scowling and his arms loosened up. He waited just a second before saying, okay. Then he stepped back to let Evan through. That's how it had been ever since they were little. Scott Spencer liked showing off his new toys. Evan followed Scott down the flight of stairs to the finished basement, which was a combination playroom and family room. It was mostly the way that Evan remembered it. 2 couches, the computer desk, the file cabinet with the locked-up snacks, bins of toys and building things, sports equipment, the swinging chair that hung from the ceiling, an electronic keyboard, and a treadmill. The thing that caught his eye, though, was the new TV. Remember, they talked about that at the beginning. It was a rumor that he got this huge TV. He did. It was enormous. The biggest flat screen plasma that Evan had ever seen in his whole life. So let's back up to when this book was written, before 2010. The first thin screens were these things called plasma screens. They didn't last very long. They were super duper expensive, but they got the TVs thin. And then the LCD screens came out and the LED screens came out that lowered the prices. And plasma screens slowly went away. I still think they make them, but that technology now is even old. Wow, said Evan. Scott smiled. Yeah, my dad bought that a few weeks ago. Cool, huh? Evan noticed the sleek white box hooked up to the TV. Is that the 2020, he asked. Wow, it's so small. Yeah, but watch what it can do. Scott handed him 2 thick gloves that looked like hockey gloves, except they were white, and a pair of heavy dark goggles that wrapped all the way around his head. Evan took off his baseball cap and put the gloves and goggles on. Then Scott pushed a button on the box. The next thing Evan knew, he was driving a car on a racetrack with other cars, whipping past him at about 120 miles per hour. Whoa, shouted Evan. Turn to your right, with your gloves. Pretend you're holding a steering wheel, and turn to your right, screamed Scott. Evan just barely missed crashing into the haystack barriers that protected the curves of the racetrack. He quickly grabbed hold of an imaginary steering wheel and got himself back on the road. Squeeze your right hand to go faster and your left hand to slow down, said Scott, turning up the volume so that the roar of the race cars filled Evan's ears. Evan could practically smell the exhaust fumes. For the next 5 minutes, Evan took the ride of his life. He had never, ever played on a game system that was so much fun. No wonder Scott couldn't stop talking about it. Scott! Scott! Yelled a voice from behind. Evan turned and whipped off the goggles. Mr. Spencer was standing at the top of the stairs. Scott jumped to turn down the volume on the TV. Remember, they used to when Scott used to invite Evan over, Evan and Scott used to try to get super loud to see like when the dad would come down. Well, they just did it. I've been calling you for the last 5 minutes. Will you turn that thing down? Do you have any idea how loud it is? Sorry, Dad, said Scott. We were just playing Road Rage. Well, you're going to blow out the speakers on the TV, and then you'll be the one to buy me a new one. And don't think I won't hold you to that. I didn't spend $5,000 on a new TV just so you could destroy it with your video games. That's an expensive piece of equipment, and you need to learn how to treat it with respect. Now keep it down. I'm trying to work. I want you to think about, again, what we know about Scott. And we saw Mom now sort of let him down. Now you can see his dad and how he interacts with his son. And this is a very short window of what we know about Scott. Maybe it's not a super big deal, but maybe it is. So he really obviously cares about this TV set, and he's trying to keep it super duper quiet so that he can work. And what we mentioned with Evan coming to the door and his parents never answering. It was always Scott answering the door. Yes, sir, said Scott. Mr. Spencer turned and disappeared at the top of the stairs. Scott picked up a baseball and started throwing it back and forth in his hands. Evan wasn't sure what to do. He put the gloves and goggles down on the floor. The race cars were still zooming by on the TV screen, but without any sound. They seem silly and fake. Your dad works a lot, huh? Said Evan. Even on a Saturday, said Scott, throwing the ball. My mom works a lot too, said Evan, but in his head he thought, but at least she doesn't yell at us for making noise. Yeah, whatever, said Scott. You want to play Crisis? It's cool. And with that, he chucked the baseball to the corner of the room. Only it was harder than a chuck. And his aim was off. Way off. The ball winged across the room and caught the corner of the TV screen.
Gone.
There was a loud crash. And then the TV went dead. Okay. So, did he do it on purpose? The boys froze. Evan couldn't make a sound. He felt like he had a sock stuffed down his throat. Similarly, there was a foot-long crack in the TV screen and a bunch of smaller cracks that looked like a spider web. Similarly, the house was completely silent except for the noise of Mr. Spencer's footsteps running down the stairs, and then he was there, standing in the doorway, staring at the TV. Did you do that on purpose? He shouted at Scott. No, said Scott, I didn't. Because you are going to pay for that, every penny of it. Your allowance, your birthday money, forget Christmas presents this year. Do you understand? A vein popped out on Mr. Spencer's forehead like something in an alien movie. Similarly, every time he said a word that started with P, pay, penny, presents, white flecks of spit flew out of his mouth. Evan thought he was going to explode or something. Hyperbole. Dad, I didn't. That television is brand new. Brand new, do you hear me? Evan took half a sideways step towards Scott. We're sorry, we didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. Mr. Spencer looked at Evan for the first time since coming downstairs. It was almost like he'd forgotten there was anyone else in the room. Slowly he breathed in and out. His teeth were clenched. His jaw was as hard as a rock wall. Similarly. Did you throw the ball? No, but we were, playing, and the ball just kind of hit the TV by mistake. We didn't do it on purpose. Evan was scared, but he couldn't help thinking what a jerk Mr. Spencer was. Sure, his mom got mad plenty of times, and sometimes she yelled, but not when it was an honest accident. If you go back to the beginning of the book, can you remember what Evan talked about with his friends, about what they would do for each other and what friends do for each other? We're sorry, Dad, said Scott in a low voice. Well, that doesn't fix the TV, does it? Said Mr. Spencer. Without another word, he walked out. The room was quiet. Okay, then, said Evan, just to fill the awkward silence. Scott looked down at the ground. Yeah, he said. He looked like his dog had just died. Simile. Evan picked up the baseball cap and jammed it on his head backwards. So this was fun, he said deadpan, but Scott didn't smile or even lift his eyes off the floor. Evan could understand. It was lousy when your own parent yelled like that in front of another kid. It made you feel like your whole family was just dirt. Scott probably wanted him to leave. Well, I'd better get home. Okay, said Scott, and thanks, for stepping in like that. Sure, no problem. 'Cause, my dad loves that TV. I mean, he really loves it. So thanks. So I want you to be thinking about this. What is Evan thinking right now about Scott with his relationship with his parents? Okay? And how does this maybe change what we know about Scott? And I've been talking about it through this whole book and really through the whole 2 books, is we don't really know Scott Spencer. We know that he acts a certain way, and now we have a small glimpse into his life. Listen, his dad should be mad. His dad should be angry about the TV being broken, but at the same time, is this how he's always treated his son? And is this a small window or is it a bigger picture? It's what friends do.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
said Evan, turning to leave. That caught him by surprise. He hadn't meant to say that. It was a little hard to think of Scott as a friend after everything that had happened. But where were they? He and Scott. Not friends, but not enemies. Somewhere between. Someplace that didn't have a name or even any rules. Evan scratched the back of his neck. So, I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry about the basketball game yesterday and the trial and everything. Look, you say you didn't take the money, and that means you didn't take the money. And I'm sorry I made such a big deal out of it and that I was such a jerk. Scott nodded his head once. Yeah, well, forget about the morning meeting thing. You and Jesse apologizing because, well, just forget about it. Okay. Evan felt better. He felt better than he had all week. It was like he'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for days and days, but now he felt so light he could practically fly. That's a simile. There's a lot to that sentence, but so now that this is over, he feels so much better. And man, was he hungry. He could hear the chocolate chip cookies calling to him from all the way down the street. Personification, hyperbole. Scott still looked pretty miserable, though, so Evan just said, "See ya," and turned to leave. He was at the top of the stairs when Scott called out, "Hang on!" Evan turned and watched as Scott reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, then used it to unlock the file cabinet in the corner. Evan hoped he was going to offer him a yodel for the road.
What you doing? Getting ready to yodel. You can't yodel. Wanna bet? Yeah. First you take some chocolate cake. It's got vanilla frosting on it. And it's all rolled up together. And then it's swished around in a whole lot of chocolatey frosting. And all you gotta do is put it in your mouth, and you're yodeling. That's not a real yodel. Oh, yes, it is. See? It's a yodel. Hey, give me one. I'll show you how to really yodel.
Now, wouldn't you like to yodel too? Then go to the store and sound off for Drake's Chocolatey Yodels. Have fun! Yodel-oo!
Yodel-oo.
A yodel would taste pretty good right now. But it wasn't a yodel that Scott pulled out from the file cabinet. It was an envelope. And Evan recognized it right away.
I knew it!
It was Jesse's envelope, the one that had $208 in it.
I knew it!
Scott handed it to him. "I'm sorry I stole your money."
I knew it! 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 I knew it!
Evan took the fat envelope. He'd forgotten what a thick wad the $208 was. All that work, all that sweat, mixing the lemonade and hauling it all over town and standing in the hot summer sun, and then having to tell Jesse that he'd lost the money. That had been the worst part of all. "I guess you're pretty mad, huh?" said Scott. Evan was surprised to hear himself say, "No."
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And surprised to know that he meant it. Maybe it was the crummy trial or the nasty basketball game or the fact that he hadn't eaten anything in nearly 24 hours. Whatever it was, Evan felt emptied out. There just wasn't any anger left inside him. "Why'd you take it, though?" he asked, looking at the money. Scott shrugged. "I don't know. 'Cause you had it, I guess." "Oh," said Evan. That didn't make sense to him. It's not like Scott needed the money. After all, his parents bought him everything he wanted. The newest iPod, the best hockey skates, the biggest TV. It just didn't make sense to Evan. But some things never do. So one, he didn't spend the money. Okay, first of all, Scott took the money, but he didn't spend it on the Xbox. He still had it. His parents did buy him that Xbox. And why do you think he took it? Think about it. Think about what Evan may represent to him and who Evan is and how everybody likes him and how everybody sided against Scott. Why did he take the money from Evan? I gotta go, Evan said, stuffing the envelope into the front of his shorts. The sun was low in the sky, and his mother didn't let him ride his bike after dark. Soon, he'd go over to Adam's house for the big meal that marked the end of the Day of Atonement. See you, he said to Scott. Yeah, later. They both walked out into the front yard. Then Evan climbed on his bike. Hey, shouted Evan as he pedaled down the driveway. The next time a ball goes over the fence, it's got your name on it. You owe me for that. Evan didn't stick around to hear Scott's reply. It would come up again. The ball in the swamp. The next time they were messing around on the basketball court. Yes, there are 3 more books. And no, I don't know what happens. But, wow, talk about a resolution. They're not friends. I think they've been enemies for too long to be friends yet. But maybe in these next 3 books we get to see them as friends. The next book is The Bell Bandit. I am going to be reading that book, and I am not going to be analyzing. I'll be talking through it. My kids in my classroom have all wanted me to kind of go through it without analyzing it so that they could see kind of my process without having everything written down right here in front of me, which I think will be a neat experience. I actually started analyzing the first chapter and then had to force myself to stop reading it so that I could give you a very authentic view on that book. That book's going to be showing up here over the next few weeks, so please make sure that you follow that and read any of my other books. To my class, as we come to the resolution, please make sure you get your plot points down and all the setting changes. And how do you feel? We got our answers. All of them. Megan found out. We saw how she reacted. We found out that Scott Spencer did steal the money but didn't use it. And he did give it back and apologized. Everybody's apologized except for Jessie. She hasn't apologized to anybody. I don't think that makes her a level 0. I think you can act a level 0 without being a level 0. Remember, she does struggle with emotions and figuring all of that out. So I will end it there. So I want to thank everybody for joining me for the Lemonade Crime and the Lemonade War and the Lemonade Wars series. I will be reading lots of other books, and I've already done that, so please make sure you hit subscribe, click on those bells, leave some comments, let me know how I'm doing, let me know what I can do better, let me know what I'm not doing well. I don't care. I just love the feedback and love the conversation. All right? Thanks to everybody, and I will see you in the next book. Peace.